Welcome to the latest edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show, coming at you over the digital airways of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio. Before I get started, as always, I take a moment to extend my gratitude and appreciation to all of my listeners and my followers and my subscribers. We've now eclipsed over 769,000 subscribers on YouTube. We've eclipsed over 2.5 million downloads on iHeartRadio over the last couple of months. Appreciate the love and support from the bottom of my heart. Can't thank y'all enough, because obviously when you have a show like this, there are some times you veer left and you go off kilter to some degree to discuss topics that are incredibly, incredibly important. And if you don't have an audience to talk to, then it doesn't make any sense, because you're just whistling into the wind. I've been blessed and fortunate enough not to have that problem, because the show continues to grow by leaps and bounds every single day because of the support you all provide. And I really, really appreciate it. Under normal circumstances, I'm having a good time and I'm doing a lot of things, talking about the world of sports, talking about the world of pop culture and entertainment, even as we talk about politics, which are obviously incredibly, incredibly important. There's a level of competition in sports, or dare I say lack of sportsmanship, that comes into the equation that make things far more thrilling and intriguing, educational, as well as just flat out interesting. But then there are other stories that it doesn't provoke a smile on anybody's face. Instead, it gives us an opportunity to reflect, look deep within ourselves and ask ourselves what kind of society we're living in and what's really, really going on in this world. You know, the case of Breonna Taylor, a young black lady out of Louisville, Kentucky, who was killed by police officers, that came back into focus last week because of a judge's ruling that I'll get into in a little bit. There was also a case involving Tyre Nichols, a young black man from Memphis, Tennessee, at the age of 29, who was brutally beaten to death by 5 police officers who have now been charged with second-degree murder. So much stuff is going on, but when you see stories like that enter the fray and it hits the headlines, it affords you the opportunity to stop and pause. A, to ask yourself what's really, really important. B, to check yourself and to ask yourself where your heart truly lies. And C, to look at the rest of our society, wondering where everybody else is at. What are they thinking? Do they feel the same that you do? Well, we're about to find out, because this is not a story that needs to be avoided, and I'm certainly not one to avoid it. Breonna Taylor and Tyre Nichols had their whole lives ahead of them, and it was stripped of them because of brutality on the part of a few police officers. Does that taint them all? No, it does not. It shouldn't. But as an institution, as a fraternity, at some point in time, you hope that highlighting these kind of stories will provide the level of provocation necessary for that fraternity of the blue to step up and step forward and to make sure they address this with the fervor and the tenacity that it deserves to weed out the corrupt amongst them. If there is a hope that we all should have, it certainly should be that, amongst other things. And that's the reason why we're going to have this discussion today. We're going to talk about this subject today. We're going to provide details about what's transpiring with regards to Breonna Taylor and Tyre Nichols' killings. And we're going to do it with noted civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump. We need to know more about what the hell has gone on and what is going on. And we need to understand where we go from here. I hope others do it, but I damn sure knew I was going to do it. Benjamin Crump with yours truly, up next, right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show, over the digital airways of YouTube and iHeartRadio. Back with more in a minute. I gotta tell y'all, I couldn't be more excited than right now. You may think it's because the NFL season is less than 2 weeks away, but guess what? It's not that. It's actually because PrizePicks is going to put me in the middle of all the big-time game action, all right? How can that be, you ask? Well, you see, PrizePicks is a daily fantasy app where you can select 2 or more of your favorite players and then pick more or less on their projected stats for the game, which means every pass, every catch, every sack are just some of the ways that you actually get to cash in. What's even better, PrizePicks is something for every sports fan, from the WNBA to Major League Baseball or golf and everything in between. I make my picks all in less than 60 seconds. Then I sit back and I watch. And get this, sign up with code SAS and PrizePicks will give you $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. You don't need to win your lineup to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. All you have to do is play a $5 lineup on PrizePicks and you'll get $50 instantly. Pick more, pick less. It's really that easy. Let's get started with two high-profile cases of black folks being killed at the hands of police officers. Breonna Taylor and Tyre Nichols. I've got a special guest on today, Mr. Benjamin Crump, that will address the latest updates on both cases. But let me remind y'all of the details surrounding both incidences first. We'll start with Breonna Taylor. You may recall she's the young lady who was shot and killed by Louisville police in an early morning raid as she and her boyfriend slept in her home in March of 2020. She and the boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, was startled awake by a pounding on the door. Walker said he assumed it was a break-in and fired a shot in the dark, which struck one of the officers. Police then returned 32 shots, which fatally wounded Taylor, who happened to be a Louisville, Kentucky medical worker. Just a few days ago, a Kentucky judge ruled that Kenneth Walker's decision to open fire is the legal cause of her death. The ruling throws out the federal charges against two officers who allegedly falsified a drug warrant that led to police breaking down Breonna Taylor's door to begin with. So joining me now is civil rights attorney Mr. Benjamin Crump, whose firm has worked with Breonna Taylor's family since the incident. Benjamin Crump, always an honor and a privilege to have you on the show, my man. Thank you so much. First things first, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there, Stephen A., and thank you so much for using your platform to talk about these important matters.
Without question, absolutely, it's necessary. And I'll get to Tyre Nichols' case in a little bit. But first, this case involving Breonna Taylor led to federal and state charges against 4 Kentucky police officers, yet 4 years later, no officer has been charged with killing Ms. Taylor. Why is that, Benjamin Crump?
It's shocking, Stephen A. It's just shocking. It perpetuates this belief that black women are the most disrespected, the most neglected, and the most unprotected people in America, as Malcolm X once said. And when you think about the fact that they lied, you were very kind, Stephen A., when you said they falsified documents. They straight up lied to get the probable cause affidavit to get the judge to sign the no-knock warrant. Without the lie, they don't have the no-knock warrant to kick in her front door at 1 o'clock in the morning without having to announce themselves. Furthermore, Stephen A., I mean, man, Kenny Walker was an American citizen who happened to be African-American. He had every right to the Second Amendment, every right.
Right to bear arms.
It's almost as if they say black people can't have a right to the Second Amendment, to right to bear arms, the right to protect our home, to protect our castle, to protect our women, when somebody comes kicking in my door at 1 in the morning. And so it's just outrageous on every level, Stephen A., that the judge will arrive at this conclusion, that the lie that put the police officers in her apartment in the first place and had her body mutilated with 8 bullet holes, that's irrelevant what the officers did. They're going to say because this black citizen had the audacity to believe that the Second Amendment was his right as well to defend his house, that's why he said that Breonna Taylor was killed. And these officers get away scot-free. And another black woman is not giving justice
Well,
in an unjustified killing.
you highlighted that they took 32 shots at them. 8 of the bullets hit Breonna Taylor, who's no longer here, God rest her soul. And you brought up her boyfriend, Kenny Walker, and how he has the right to bear arms. He was protecting his home. I introduced the subject talking about how they were banging at the door. And you corrected me by reminding me they actually kicked in the door and into this property. It wasn't like they were knocking at the door and he shot at them. Somebody kicked in his door, and as a result, he shot in the dark and hit one of the officers, and that was an excuse for them to fire 32 bullets when the warrant that they had should have never existed to begin with, because they didn't have probable cause to receive a warrant. They had flat out lied to get the warrant. I get where you're coming from with that, Benjamin Crump. Am I right in what I just articulated?
You're absolutely right. They lied. They said that the postmaster, the inspector general from the post office, told them that Breonna was getting suspicious packages delivered to her apartment complex. And the postmaster said that was not true. He never said that. And that's why we can never take them at their word. We always have to have accountability, Stephen A. And public pressure matters. Had it not been for people like you using your platform, the National Basketball Players Association wearing shirts that said, say her name. If you didn't have people marching in the streets, this would have been business as usual. Because regrettably, Stephen A., we still live in a society where they consider it too extravagant to allow constitutional rights for some citizens. The Fourth Amendment right against unlawful search and seizures is a hallmark of our Constitution. You just can't come in my house and violate my right to privacy. You have to have extremely important reasons to be able to do that.
Well,
but when it's Black and brown citizens, they always get these no-knock warrants. In Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna was killed, Stephen A., over 90% of the people who had no-knock warrants served against them were people of color. They're not kicking in white people's houses
stop right
at
there.
1 in the morning.
I need you to stop right there. What's the black population in Louisville, Kentucky compared to the white population? Since the no-knock warrants, 90% of the no-knock warrants are against black folks. What's the black population in Louisville compared to the white population?
26% African-American.
26% African-American, approximately 70 to 74% white, yet black folks, the no-knock warrants against them, 90%. They take up 90% of the no-knock warrant cases.
Yeah, and so the blur is on everybody's hands. It's not just on the police officers' hands. It's on those judges that only sign no-knock warrants for Black people and brown people. And so we have to really delve into the deeper issues of how foreseeable it was that somebody innocent like Breonna Taylor was going to be killed. I mean, it was foreseeable. Stephen, they think about if somebody kicked in your front door at 2 in the morning and you don't know who it is. You're going to say, hold on, they're breaking in, they're burglarizing. Why isn't that judge saying Kenny Walker had the same right to think that?
Well, and that's what I'm wondering about. I'm wondering if police ever identified themselves, because it certainly doesn't sound that way. But let me get to my next question, because last week, U.S. District Judge Charles Simpson ruled there was, quote, no direct link, end quote, between the allegedly false search warrant on Taylor's home and her fatal shooting by police officers executing the warrant. I need you to explain what the rationale is behind that thinking. No direct link whatsoever. I know you just highlighted what transpired, but what's the case that the judge could possibly formulate where he's saying there was no direct link whatsoever?
You know, Stephen A., I wrote a book called Open Season, and we talked about how they come up with intellectual justification to discriminate. And I don't know how else we could say it. Imagine if Breonna was a white woman and this happened to her. Would you get that ruling? That is a question that digs into the heart of many African Americans who think that Breonna could have been my daughter. And therefore, he talks about, well, there was an intervening cause when Kenny Walker chose to shoot at the police. Now, he seems to just glaze over the fact that Kenny Walker and said they didn't know it was the police. And so, again, he says the fact that they lied, that's not going to be a big issue for me. And the fact that they lied after they killed Breonna, they lied and tried to conspire and cover it up. He said, apparently, the police lying is no big deal. But a black man trying to defend him home, Kenny Walker was never convicted of any criminal matter in his life.
Yeah.
He was a law-abiding citizen. He was a registered gun owner. Where's the NRA speaking up for Kenny Walker?
Yeah, that's a different subject for another day, too, because the NRA should be speaking up for him. And to my knowledge, he hasn't been convicted of a crime in this particular instance. Am I missing something?
No, he was not convicted of a crime. In fact, the city settled with him in the civil matter also with the family of Breonna Taylor, but they gave Kenny Walker $2 million. But this judge almost is saying that you all have got enough justice. Just go on. And that's hurtful because it sets a precedent, Stephen A. And that's the worst thing about this, besides Breonna being taken from this earth, the precedent that it has set for others.
Last question on this particular case. Where does the family go from here?
You know, her mother's devastated. Her mother's just devastated. She's not even, she talked to me and my co-counsel one time on the phone, but she's not even answering the phone. And so what we have to do is continue to fight to make sure we say her name. The United States Department of Justice is appealing the ruling of the judge. And hopefully and prayerfully, it will get reversed. And finally, Breonna might get justice. Stephen, I must say this before you move on. It's very rare that Black women killed by police get any kind of criminal accountability.
Wow. The one and only Benjamin Crump, civil rights attorney extraordinaire, right here with yours truly on the Stephen A. Smith Show over the digital airwaves of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio. Back with more, specifically the Tyre Nichols case in a minute.
It pays to get paid on Cash App. Some people think paying overdraft fees is unavoidable. When you deposit your paycheck on Cash App, you can get up to $50 in free overdraft coverage. Having a little cushion to give you peace of mind at no extra cost is a very beautiful thing. If you could deposit your paycheck on Cash App and get up to $50 in overdraft coverage at no cost, would you? I'm talking about up to $50 in free overdraft coverage. A little peace of mind in case of oversight at no extra cost. Now that's something to think about. Stop sitting on the bench with people who can't play and get into the game with Cash App. So once again, getting paid on Cash App isn't just convenient. Cash App has got you covered. It pays to get paid on Cash App. That's money. That's Cash App. Download Cash App from the App Store or Google Play Store today.
Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show right here over the digital airwaves of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio. Now let's get to the case of Tyre Nichols, a 29-year-old Black FedEx worker who was beaten by Memphis police officers for roughly 3 minutes on the evening of January 7th, 2023. Memphis police initially said they stopped Nichols for reckless driving. The stop escalated into a violent confrontation that ended with Mr. Nichols hospitalized in critical condition. 3 days later, he died, and 5 officers were relieved of their duty and now face second-degree murder charges in the state of Tennessee. They also faced federal charges linked to the violation of Nicholas's civil rights. Well, just last Friday, a second police officer pleaded guilty to the federal civil rights violation under a plea agreement with prosecutors. Again, all 5 former officers accused of Nichols' death have been charged separately in state court with second-degree murder. That trial is postponed until the federal proceedings are complete. I'd like to bring back Benjamin Crump, civil rights attorney extraordinaire. Let's get right to it, Ben. What's your reaction to these latest developments in Tyre Nichols' case?
Well, I expect that each of the 5 officers will plead guilty. The video is very clear. It shows that the excessive force, the brutality, the lack of any kind of consideration when Tyre Nichols was literally falling unconscious. They held him up and they punched him some more. They kicked him. They hit him with batons. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. And obviously, Stephen A., the fact that there are 5 Black police officers is just shocking on every level, because you do think, Stephen A., why couldn't they see the humanity in Tyre, that this could have been their little brother? And so, yeah, I expect all of them are going to plea. And this last one to plea, you have Mills plea first. He can get up to 15 years, but Martin just pled, and he can get up to 40 years because he is one of the main perpetrators of the violence. I mean, he punches him repeatedly over and over and over again, while Tyre Nichols literally said, I just want to go home. I mean, that's it.
Did they ever explain why they did it, Ben? Did they ever explain why they pulled him over to begin with and why they beat him so mercilessly? Did they ever explain?
They didn't, Stephen A. But what we believe and what we have alleged in our civil lawsuit is that America is going to be shocked by the revelations of what we're getting in discovery from depositions from the officers. And that is that the Scorpion unit, this special tactic unit within the Memphis Police Department, had, I guess, been an unwritten policy that they could violate the constitutional rights of citizens living in the Black community. And they said they formed the Scorpion unit to deal with crime. The question that I'm often asked is some kind of justification of, well, they got to do that because it's a high crime area. And my response has always been this, Stephen A. Well, what are you doing in the other communities to curtail crime? Then do that in the South Side minority community as well. But don't tell us that you get to violate the constitutional rights of every citizen just because there are some bad apples.
Let me pause you for a second. Are you sitting here on this show and telling me that this Scorpion unit literally had the license to do what they were doing, but specifically as it pertained to that area, a particular area of Memphis, Tennessee, as opposed to, indiscriminately communities throughout Memphis? You're saying they had the license to act accordingly in a specific community?
That's exactly what we're saying, Stephen A. It is the most clear case of a Monell claim I have ever seen in my 27 years of practice in law. A Monell claim is what the United States Supreme Court said: if the city or the municipality or political subdivision engages in a pattern and practice, then you can use that as evidence to show that the city is responsible, not just the individual officers. And you have officers saying, who were on that Scorpion unit, that this was condoned. We had other citizens come forward and say, they did this to me and I committed no crime. And so this goes all the way to the top of the Memphis Police Department. The blood of Tyre Nichols' death is not just on those 5 officers, but it is on the people who instituted the policies to say that this Scorpion unit exists. It has been disbanded. And the police chief that came from Atlanta, Georgia to Memphis had a similar unit called the Red Dog Unit in Atlanta, Georgia, where several officers went to prison, and it had been disbanded. And so we have to deal with this issue that you can't protect and serve certain communities and then police and brutalize other communities.
Real quickly, Desmond Mills Jr., how much time is he facing?
Well, he can get up to 40 years in prison, but remember, the most any police officer has ever been sentenced was with George Floyd killer Derek Chauvin, and that was 22 years and 6 months. Normally, police officers get around 10 years prison. It's very rare that they get more time than that.
What kind of prison?
I don't know why, Stephen
what kind of prison?
If you would have did this,
that's right.
You would get 40 years.
Okay, well, for shoving aside the amount of time, what kind of prison is it? There's various levels of prison. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you know this better than me. What kind of prison are they in? When they get in, these officers customarily are put in prison. What kind of prison is that?
Well, they're put in a separate unit away from general population because they're law enforcement, and so they try to protect them from having retribution from fellow prisoners. And that, you know, police is treated differently because we do give them a certain level of authority to use necessary force up to deadly force. And when they go to prison for crimes, they may often encounter people who they have put in prison. And so they're not going to be put in general population like you would be, Stephen A. or I, had I beat a person to death.
Officer Emmett Martin III pled guilty to 1 count of deprivation of rights under color of law for both participating in and allowing for the unlawful assault, and to another count related to conspiracy and witness tampering, after he discussed lying or downplaying what happened to his superiors with the other officers. What is he facing?
Well, Mills is facing 15 years. There's a old saying amongst criminal law, and that is, if you're going to cooperate, you better be one of the first ones to cooperate, because the funny joke that the judges say, the price of poker goes up the longer you stay in the game. And so Mills played first to tell that this was a policy and tell on other officers. Now Martin has come forward and pled guilty and is agreeing to cooperate. There are 3 more that are out there, and I suspect if they don't plea, when they go to trial, the judge is going to be very punitive in his sentence of them for having them go through the trial. You have a constitutional right that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. However, when there's a strong presumption of guilt, like a videotape of you killing a unarmed innocent man, then there is a presumption that you will try to offer your plea to the court in the most merciful manner possible. And if you don't do that, then the court says, we're going to sentence you to the full extent of the law. We're not going to give you any benefit because you cooperated and tried to do the right thing, especially in the fact, as you said, Stephen A., they are caught on body camera video conspiring and lying, trying to come up with excuses. And then they go to Tyre's mama's house, and they're on body cam videotape telling her that, well, we had to tase him. Is he on drugs? We think he has something dealing with drugs. They never told his mother how bad they beat him. Thank God there was a video camera atop of the night light pole in that community.
That's right, the light at the top, at the pole across the street, because they had their body cams off. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, 4 of them had their body cams off. 1 of them had it on.
And the one that kept it on, he kept it on intentionally?
I don't think so. I think it was part of their modus operandi to turn these body cameras off when they knew they were going to violate citizens' constitutional rights.
So they didn't have any idea that the camera was on across the street?
Oh, no, had no idea. And because you got to think, had they known, Stephen, that they wouldn't have did this. I mean, go back and look at that video when you have
it's
a
vicious.
moment.
I watched it.
It's sensitive.
I think they should all. I think they should all be in jail for the rest of their lives. All of them who participate. That's my personal opinion. I don't think anybody should get less than life. That's how badly, that's what they did to this kid. That's what they facilitated. But let me ask you this last question, because you brought up the Scorpion unit. I imagine, knowing you the way that I do, if you knew of a Scorpion unit and you learned of a Scorpion unit in Memphis, Tennessee, you probably think it exists not just throughout the state of Tennessee instead of the city of Memphis, but you probably think it exists at a lot of different places across the United States of America. What has this investigation allowed you to discover that's permeating throughout the streets of America in the black community when it comes to police enforcement?
Stephen, regrettably and sadly, that these special tactic units exist in many of the major cities across America. And in Miami, Florida, they call them the jump out boys. As we said in Atlanta, it was the Red Dog unit. They have a unit in Chicago. They have it in New York. And it just is sad that they justify violating the Constitution. They condone it. They try to say, well, we get the police and brutalize them, and we protect and serve everybody else. We have the capacity to be better than that, to have the community and police work together. And that's what we have to continue to strive to do, because Black people, we want and need police just like every other community. Mm-hmm. But we need good police. We don't need police that shoot us in the back, police that put their knee on our necks, police that kick open our front door and shoot us at 1 o'clock in the morning while we're sleeping in our nightgowns. We need police that care about us just like they care about their own families.
The one and only Benjamin Crump, civil rights attorney extraordinaire, right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show over the digital airwaves of YouTube and iHeartRadio. Really appreciate you, Ben. Thank you so much, my man. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Frank. Love you, brother.
Love you too. One and only Benjamin Crump right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. You know he's absolutely right with every single word that he uttered. You know that, right? I mean, when we're talking about what we're talking about here, we're talking about individuals. I'm not one of these people that sit around and talk about police brutality. I repeatedly and intentionally utter out of my mouth brutality on the part of some police officers. Because there's white police officers, there's Black police officers, there's Latino police officers, there's Asian Americans as police officers, and I don't want to castigate everybody. I've always been one of those dudes that would sit around and say, you know something? If somebody wants to engage in criminal activity, I don't want somebody Black who's doing that, and everybody assumes all of us are doing that. So if I don't want somebody castigating my entire community because of the actions of one or the actions of the few, I don't want to do it to somebody else. But then I see a case like this with Tyre Nichols and the way they beat that boy to death. Beat him to death. Go back and watch the tape. They killed this kid. He's not a kid, he's 29 years old, but they killed that young man right down the block from his house while he was crying for his mama before he could. I just want to go home. And crying for his mama. I remember an officer turning away, and he's motionless and cuffed, sitting on the ground, hands behind his back, cuffed. And the officer walked up and hit him again. Hit him again. Beat mercilessly. And how are we supposed to feel, ladies and gentlemen? This is clearly about brutality on the part of police officers, right? To the Black community, how do we feel about the fact that each and every single one of those officers was Black? See, we can't talk about racism now. What we have to talk about instead is the dehumanization of Black lives. Because we ain't seen it done to anybody else. Not saying that it has or hasn't happened. I said we ain't see it. Tyre Nichols is dead. We said 3 minutes. I want you to imagine 3 minutes. That's 180 seconds. Sit down right now, close your eyes, and count to 180. Each one of those seconds, he was being beaten to death by at least 4 are the 5 police officers that were charged. All bigger, all stronger, because he was a relatively skinny kid. Beat him for 1 minute, for 3 minutes, 180 seconds. You know how long that is when you are getting beaten, kicked and punched and stomped? You know how long that is? I said it at the time. I'll say it again. Those officers should be in jail for the rest of their natural lives. They should never see the light of day again. Ever. A life for a life. In this case, 5 lives for 1. The only person that reserves any kind of pass, meaning instead of life, you might get 20 to 25 years, or at least you should, is whoever didn't hit him. Anybody that put their hands on that young man should never see life outside of a prison cell again. And even if you do see life from inside of a prison cell, guess what? That's still more of a life than he has. They put him 6 feet under a while ago because of those actions. Unforgivable, unconscionable. Hell with all of those officers. Hell with all of them. That's it for this edition of the Stephen A. Smith Show. I appreciate y'all joining me today. I really am not in the mood to talk about anything else or to do anything else because I'm afraid of what the hell I would say moving forward. So I'm going to get on out of here for the day. I'll see y'all in a couple of days. Until then, peace and love. God bless.